Hello everyone, welcome back to Strawberry Podfic. This is It's a Small World by emphasis on Ghostwriter. I already recorded the first part of chapter 4, so I'm going to go ahead and record the other, I think, 3 parts. Let me check. 2 parts. And they're going to all be in this one same video. Hopefully it's not, super long. I will include a list of the group chat names in the description, in case you get confused at any point. This is Chapter 4, Entrance Exam, Part 2. Hizashi. Hizashi had always enjoyed the entrance exams. Well, as a teacher at least. They didn't love them. The days were always long, tedious, and few, if any, prospective students ever yelled his cheer back at him. Additionally, their main job during the physical portion for the hero course was to keep an eagle eye out for any major injuries, and that was stressful. They were throwing a bunch of untrained, overpowered teenagers into a free-for-all with just as many, if not more, robots, and accidents happened in the blink of an eye. Just because no one had died during any past UA entrance exams didn't mean no one would. Hizashi's eyes in real time were the first line of defense in case any specific robot, or kami forbid, the entire exam needed to be stopped. Their eyes were very sharp, picking up the slack for the hearing his quirk had mostly destroyed before he'd mastered control of it. Despite that, he did enjoy entrance exam days. He liked the air of anticipation, the somehow brighter thrum of energy that flowed in with kids prepared to give everything they had for a shot at their dreams. The air always felt a bit more crisp, with all that potential building up to be placed out on the battlefield. This year, though, they had more cause to be excited than normal. This year, their son might be participating. He wasn't their son yet. His still peacefully snoring husband would have pointed out if he could hear Hizashi's thoughts, where they were in the bathroom while getting ready. His hair, while iconic, was a bitch to style. He had to style it before he could brew coffee, because the smell of it would wake Shota earlier than he needed to be up. Their poor husband needed all the rest he could get. Ghost wasn't their son quite yet. No, but Shota was convinced they were close. It just depended on whatever the last few, maybe, hang-ups were the kid was working through. The kid feeling comfortable enough to give them his legal name was the unspoken signal that he was ready for them to adopt him, and while it may not be the same as the kid actually giving them that precious name, they all knew if he got into the school, Shota was going to figure out who he was. Hell, there was a strong chance Shota found him today, if he actually came. It had to be a sign, right? If their kid at least trusted them enough to let that happen. Maybe even bigger a sign that he trusted them to not do anything without information until the two knew he was ready. Hizashi hoped so. But none of that was going to happen if they didn't get this show on the road. Ridiculous hair finally in place, Hizashi made his way to the kitchen to get breakfast started. This part of his morning routine was also one of his favorite parts of the day. There was something about the quiet of an extra early morning that had a comforting weight to it, and the bright of a well-lit kitchen pushing out to meet it, combined with the softly playing radio, made it all the cozier. It was a much-needed calm before the storm of how hectic the day was going to be, and his darling husband's zombie walk into the kitchen once it was finally time to get the coffee started only made it better. Especially when Shota wore that tiny how-did-I-get-so-lucky smile when Hizashi pressed a soft good-morning kiss into his hairline and a cup of coffee into his hands. Were they both sappy and soft for each other? Absolutely, but they deserved it, and neither would have it any other way. Soon enough, though, the pair were dressed and on their way to UA. Shota via the rooftops to help wake himself back up, and Hizashi along the sidewalks, thermoses of coffee in hand for both of them. When he did his hair at home, he preferred to walk. They lived close enough, and his hair didn't fit well in the car. He could tell by how his phone started buzzing as he entered the school that their friends were starting to come. He could tell by how his phone started buzzing as he entered the school that their friends were starting to come alive as well. Speed Demon. Good luck with the examinees today. Also, extra heads up, Tanya's nervous, so he might be extra him. I tried to calm him down before he left, but not sure how well that'll stick. Speed demon. Also, Shota, don't kill Vlad. Catnip. Oh, poor Bug. I'm sure he'll do fine, though. You've been working with him for years. Do crime. You make that joke every year. It's just a friendly rivalry. I'm not gonna kill Vlad. Do crime. It's not like I have any stakes on hand anyways. Do crime. Also, who changed my username? I'd assume Zashi, but he usually does music-related names. Be gay. Wasn't me. Be gay. Wait. Catnip. That's just a keyboard spam. I don't want to try to pronounce that. Whoever did that, you're a genius and my new hero. Do crime. The list shortens. Don't do catnip. It was now. Be gay. Not gonna lie, didn't expect that. Do crime. Betrayal. Speed demon. Shota was being all love-struck in his office again, wasn't he? Don't do catnip. Yep. Why you lying? I think that's a lyric. I tried to sing it. I don't think I'm gonna do that again. Yep. Why you lying? He infected my sacred space with his gay. Catnip. Now, you're literally bi. Don't do catnip. I don't know if you can say that when I know what you've done in there. Why you lying? ... Catnip. What? Be gay. Holy shit. Do crime. No. Absolutely not. Speed demon. I just snorted coffee out of my nose. Do crime. For the love of God, please tell me my couch is safe. Do crime. That couch is for napping. Why you lying? Shota, it's literally my couch. Do crime. Not anymore. Catnip. Tell me everything. I thought he was single. Why you lying? Don't you fucking dare. Don't do catnip. He is. Winky face. Do crime. Sansa, look at what you've done. I'm actually going to commit an actual crime. Now, I know where you sleep. Speed demon. He brought out the proper grammar. Do we need to be concerned? Be gay. No, he's just being dramatic and needs an outlet for how annoyed All Might is making him right now. Catnip. He just needs more coffee. He'll be fine. Speed demon. Oh yeah, I heard about him teaching at UA this year. What's with that? I didn't think he had a teaching license. Do crime. He doesn't. The commission pulled strings. The rat's not very happy about it, but it's time for the pre-exam meeting. Catch you later. Do crime. Also, now, that couch better fucking be safe. Hisashi snorted at Shota's ire as he put his phone away, prompting the man to give a long, suffering sigh from his spot next to him at the conference table. Hisashi gave his arm a comforting pat as the exam day got well and truly started. A few hours later found Hisashi proctoring the written exam in UA's biggest auditorium, not necessarily the most typical place to host a standardized exam, but the seats in there had been customized with retractable desks after Shota had gotten hired, so he could hide in the lighting above Hisashi's head and use his quirk to check for / stop cheating with quirks. Of course, any applicants would receive bonus points if they did notice him, but Hisashi was surprised when that actually came into play a little under an hour into the exam. Done with your shit. Dad. One of the examinees just clocked me. Section 2, row 3, fifth from the right. Dad. How exciting! I don't believe anyone has ever actually noticed you before. That's Midoriya Izuku, and he's applying for the hero course. The points have been added to his file. Smiley face. Spike. Holy shit, one of the kids actually noticed Aizawa? You're not losing your edge, are you? Done with your shit. Fuck off. Too old for this. Language theory. Done with your shit. Sorry, Chio. Sleepy time tea. Lamafau. Hisashi quickly spotted the kid in question, sitting not too far from where they were stationed on the stage, watching over the applicants. Honestly, the kid was adorable, a little small for his age, but not worryingly so, with some sort of animal ears. Cat maybe, but hard to tell from this distance, even in the brightly lit auditorium. Nestled amongst a nest of dark green curls and freckles littering what he could see of the kid's face, like little stars. No school uniform, but he'd taken the opportunity to dress fairly nice anyways. Not all the home or online school kids did. It was always nice to see. He flipped through his packet at a moderate speed, clearly double-checking his work as he cross-referenced each question with the scantron before slouching down in his seat, clearly bored, but also anxiously fidgeting with his pencil, staring forward blankly with emerald green eyes. Local radio host. Looks like the little listener's already done with his test. Seems to be just rechecking his answers and waiting. I did tell them that they can turn in their tests and leave when they finished, right? Done with your shit. You did. Spaghetti Western. Didn't the written portion only start like an hour ago? Have any students ever finished a Nezu test that fast? Star Sailor. Overconfidence or just that smart? Aizawa, you've got a good sense for that. What do you think? Done with your shit. He's checked his answers at least twice that I've seen, which doesn't point towards overconfidence or for me. Spike of 4. They're all repeating Aizawa's typo. He spelled 4 wrong. He spelled it O-F-R. I think I pronounced it like that, sort of. They're all just repeating it, and then Aizawa sends a knife emoji. Yeah, chatfics don't really translate well into podfics. Anyways, Dad. Midoriya seems to just be that smart. I looked into his file, and it's interesting, to say the least. I'm intrigued to see how today goes for him. Smiley face. Spike. Here. Done with your shit. Nezu, he's just a kid. We don't even know if he's going to make it into the school or not. Dad. Not to worry, Shota-kun. If he does even half as well as I think he will, the idea of him not passing will be laughable. Smiley face. Done with your shit. At least wait until the day is over before you start scheming. Bob the Builder. At least he'll be a hero course problem. I have my own problem child this year, and I don't want to deal with 2. The better Bob. Lamau. Bob the Builder. Get your laughs in now, buddy. You're gonna be the one fixing every building she explodes. A notification popped up for their personal chat, so Hisashi switched over, leaving Higari and Ken to squabble like the cousins they were. Moonbeam. Do those look like cat ears to you? Sunbeam. I don't know, maybe. They match his hair too well to tell for sure. Why? You know you can't just claim him for your class because he's a cat, right? Sunbeam. Also, how concerned do we need to be? Last time Nezu said something like that about a kid's file, he destroyed a school district. Moonbeam. I caught that too. Just try not to borrow trouble for now. Sunbeam. Well, that's an alarming response, love. Care to elaborate? Sunbeam. Show? A few minutes passed without any further texts from his husband in either chat, so Hisashi huffed and locked his phone, putting it back into his pocket. Whatever was going through Aizawa's head, he'd share when he was good and ready. Hisashi tried to ignore the part of him wondering if it had anything to do with Ghost. I'm gonna, take a break and drink something before we move on to the next, POV for this chapter. My mouth's a little dry. Okay, I'm back from my break. The next POV, Aizawa. Aizawa mostly had 2 jobs during the entrance exams. Check for cheating during the written portion while providing the opportunity for bonus points for situation awareness. One of the ways they were able to help level the playing field a little bit for non-combative quirks. They'd prefer to change the exam entirely, but the commission wouldn't let them. In helping grade and keep an eye on the physical portion for the heroics course. The written portion was usually a mildly annoying but generally boring experience. He usually had to fight the temptation to just take a nap, and it exacerbated his dry eye. But he could just chill by himself where he hid in the stage lights and get a break from peopling. It was a little different today, with the potential of Ghost being one of the prospective students scattered below him, since every student had to take the written portion regardless, of course. But the perspective was bad from his vantage point, so he hadn't held out much hope. He may have had more cause for hope than he thought, because the green-haired child he'd already seen checking his answers once briefly made eye contact with him and froze during one of his pass-throughs. Shirt had been doing this since he started as a teacher at UA, and to date no students had ever noticed him, which spoke volumes for the kid's situational awareness. Who was more likely to have that level of skill, a trained vigilante, or your random hero hopeful? He wished he could see the kid's face better. He was too far away to check for fangs, and all he could tell of the kid's eyes were that they were the same shade of green. It was the right color. He just couldn't tell if it was the vibrant emerald he remembered so clearly. He'd also never seen the vigilante's hair. Not that it was uncommon for vigilantes to hide their hair, especially if it was as distinctive as the child's below. But he couldn't help but wonder if Ghost wasn't also trying to hide those ears. Ears that could very well belong to an animal with fangs, and the little claws Ghost's gloves didn't always cover. Shota knew Hisashi had picked up on there being a reason beyond, wait, cat, behind why he's asked about his ears. They were intelligent, and Shota knew well a deadly combination on its own, even before adding the rest of the conversation they'd been having about the kid. Shota didn't want to tell him his suspicions, though, until he had something more concrete. If he got their hopes up, and it turned out Ghost wasn't here after all, they'd both be crushed. If he savored the fact that they might finally be able to put a name to their kid after literal years, though, well, that was nobody's business but his own. Izuku, simply amazing. Shota's friends would never let him live it down, though, if the kid had been hiding a cat quirk this entire time and the man had never known. Thankfully, the day moved quickly for once, and soon enough the underground hero found himself sequestered in the control room for the physical exam sites with the other teachers who were grading that year. The non-hero course teachers shared a reaction, impatiently waiting for a familiar voice to call, "Go!" Nezu, of course, noticed. The rat was both his pseudo-father figure and sitting right beside him. It'd be impossible for him not to. There was no doubt he'd connected the dots between Midoriya's file, behavior, and Shota's interest, but all Nezu did was pat him on the arm in a subtle form of comfort. Might have connected more dots with whatever it was he'd seen in the file, but he stubbornly ignored Shota's requests for access beyond more than just the UA application through their lunch break. It didn't matter. Soon they'd all know for sure. Shota leaned forward in his seat, with an intent eye on the screens in front of him, as a quirk-assisted "go" finally echoed across the room. Practical had begun. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next part of this chapter, and then that's it, because I did a lot of recording today. My mouth is feeling dry. I'm gonna pause right there. This is the last part of Chapter 4. Entrance Exam, Part 3. Izuku. Izuku felt a lot more calm than he'd expected he would. Once again, in his seat in the far less crowded auditorium, listening to the idle chatter of the hero hopefuls waiting to hear the how of one of the most important tests they'd ever take would work. It was probably 2 parts vigilante training kicking in, keeping him focused. 1 part, his brain just rejecting the enormity of the entire ordeal to keep him calm. Whatever the reason, he'd take it. Overall, the day was going better, so far, knock on wood, than he had anticipated. He'd had one terrifying moment of almost eye contact with his eraser dad, but he didn't think the man had registered it. Izuku watched him out of his periphery until enough people had turned in their tests that he could too, and from what he could tell, Aizawa had never reacted to his presence. The man could be an enigma, though. He'd worry more about it later. His other main concern, until the practical actually started, was Bakugo, his former childhood buddy. His former childhood bully. He was here, as Izuku had known he'd be. He'd heard the other boys' not-so-dulcet tones a whole way away, and had been able to avoid him easily so far. Not for the first time, Izuku wished he could dye his hair, but he didn't trust that kind of chemicals around his sensitive cat ears. He was just stuck with the green until it decided to go gray, he guessed. From what he'd observed, though, Bakugo hadn't changed at all in the intervening 5-ish years since they'd seen each other. Just as arrogant and loud as ever, yelling about extras in his way. Izuku hoped they were assigned different testing sites. The weirdest part of today so far was watching Present Mike in action in person. He did feel bad for them when their call and response had been met with dead silence. It wasn't worth the attention he'd draw if he was the only one yelling back, though. Anyways, Izuku had thought he was familiar with Present Mike. He'd been one of Izuku's favorite heroes since he was a kid. He'd nearly grown up on the Put Your Hands Up radio show, and he'd followed the hero's career closely both before he'd become a vigilante and after. Somehow, though, he still hadn't been prepared for just how different the boisterous DJ felt from the earnest and excitable, yet gentle and kind Sashi Ghost had met. Izuku was struck by the absurd notion that Present Mike felt like a stepfather in terms of familiarity. He didn't know what to do with that. He eventually shook his head to dismiss the notion. It was probably the unexpected dichotomy talking anyways. By then, though, he'd missed the part of the instructions, and Present Mike was describing the different robots they'd be facing. Praying Aizawa would never know about that specific lapse in awareness, Izuku's mind kicked into gear as he analyzed the robots. Robots were better for him to deal with than some of the other schools' entrance exams. Some of the schools had applicants fight each other. At least he didn't have to hold back against or worry about potentially causing actual damage to machines like he would other kids. Based on the diagrams and what he'd learned studying what was publicly and not so publicly, once he'd actually gathered up the courage to try hacking into Nezu's systems, he was pretty sure the principal was some sort of father figure to Aizawa, making him some sort of grandfather figure to Izuku? He'd be fine, probably. Available... that is one run-on sentence. Available of power loader's work. These would have weak points around the base and neck, and at least one off switch somewhere. Izuku just needed to get through the gate fast enough to have enough time to find them. He was glad he'd thought ahead enough to do research into his work. But then, it wasn't that far-fetched to think UA might somehow use the man's work in their exams. Plan A was finding and focusing on the off switches until Plan B, finding a piece of debris from other fights suitable for attacking the weak points of the robots. His next issue was that there was no way that this was all there was to the exam. First of all, that wasn't all there was to hero work, and second, there was no way any exam Nezu had a personal hand in was ever going to be that straightforward. It just wasn't going to happen. Izuku just wasn't sure what the other criteria were. He hadn't caught a whiff in his hacking, and none of the instruction materials mentioned anything. Rescuing other applicants in danger probably went without saying. First aid would also make sense, except for the fact that they weren't allowed supplies like that. Just whatever exercise clothes they preferred, and any support gear specifically for quirks, like gloves for those with 5-point activation quirks. Maybe some sort of subterfuge/sneaking/infiltration point system, but how would that work when the exam was only 10 minutes? "Present Mike, sir," a booming voice sounded from a few rows behind him, jerking Izuku from his thoughts. He turned around to see a tall, blue-haired robot kid making chopping motions with his arms. "The testing booklet shows 4 types of robots, but you've only covered 3. Surely a school such as UA wouldn't make such a mistake. And you!" Izuku squeaked in mortification when the kid pointed at him. Of all people, instantly hunching down and staring at his shoes to hide his burning face from everyone's eyes. "Have been mumbling this the entire time. Hero work is serious business. If you can't take it seriously, you need to leave." Okay, listener number 112, Present Mike interrupted the boy's rant, drawing all eyes away from Izuku. "Let's leave the other applicants alone, you dig? And there's been no mistake. I just hadn't gotten to the last robot yet. This guy's worth 0 points, really only released to be a distraction from the other robots. Not really worth worrying your little heads about. Now, unless anyone has any questions, your information packets have your assigned testing site numbers, and the buses are waiting outside to take you there. They leave in 15 minutes, so be sure not to miss them. Come on, everyone, let's go!" The hero paused a beat, probably hoping, but ultimately failing to gain support for the infamous rallying cry, "Plus Ultra!" Izuku made it to the bus, and to his relief, Bakugo wasn't on it. I never know how to say that fucking word. Chagrin? I don't know. To his chagrin, though, the yelly kid was at his testing site, glancing through the crowd milling around outside the gate. Only a certain dirty blonde remained conspicuously. Can't say words today. Jeez. Glancing through the crowd milling around outside the gate, only a certain blonde remained conspicuously absent. Will wonders never cease? A different blonde jostled into him, stopping to give Izuku a shocked expression that seemed far too intense, given that the kid had bumped into Izuku, not the other way around. Before Izuku could react, Present Mike popped out and yelled, "Go!" Izuku was off like a rocket through the still opening gate. There were no countdowns in hero work, and hesitance could get you killed. Your colleagues or innocent There were no countdowns in hero work, and hesitance could get you, your colleagues, or innocent civilians killed. Distantly, he heard President Mike telling the others much the same. But Izuku was already circling the first robot he could reach. A two-pointer. Sure enough, near the join between the shoulder and the neck, on the right side lay a little black power button. Izuku, faster than this model, darted in to press it from behind. He was not expecting the robot to explode in a small burst that was more light than heat, shocking him and the handful of other applicants that had caught up. It wasn't a power button. It was a self-destruct button. Well, damn. Izuku worked that knowledge into his current plan. If he had to go for the buttons, do it without having most of his person that close to the robot. He was probably lucky the first one maybe only left him with a couple of bruises at most. His luck continued to hold, and not long after that he found a pink girl with an acid quirk who was happy enough to melt off a signpost for him. Going ham with it on a bunch of robots, either hitting their weak spots or the buttons depending on the model, was almost as much fun as a patrol spent needling Eraser. Izuku lost track of his points fairly quickly, but with the thorough glee he was taking in the moment, that he was sure also showed on his face from the reaction of some of the kids he'd pulled out of harm's way. This was one of the reasons he loved his helmet. No worries about whatever the hell his face was doing. And he wasn't all that concerned about it yet. Undestroyed robots started becoming difficult to find around the time the 2-minute mark was announced. Coincidentally, or not, around the same time, the ground started shaking. The 0-pointers had been released. Izuku pulled to a stop for a moment in exasperation when he saw the behemoth, taller than some of the buildings on the fake city block, had rumbled down. Part of him wanted the name of whoever first came up with the idea of putting that monstrosity in an arena filled with 14 to 15-year-olds. He just wanted to talk, he swears. He heard the cry for help rise above the din of everyone running in the opposite direction, but couldn't see where it was coming from in the rush of moving bodies. He had to jump up on some rubble for a better vantage point to finally see a girl with pink cheeks and a brunette bob caught under a cement slab in the path of the 0-pointer. Keeping an eye on the ticking time bomb headed their way, Izuku rushed over, surprised to find the blonde from earlier hot on his heels. "Are you hurt? Do you think you're bleeding anywhere? General injuries would be good to know. Pulling her out and getting out of the way of the robot would be the safest option. But there was always the chance that she had an injury that was too dangerous to move, or that she was bleeding in a way that the slab was keeping pressure on, and removing it without proper medical intervention present could be dangerous. She didn't look like she was in too much pain, just vaguely green, but adrenaline was a powerful force that could hide a lot of pain. Just my ankle. I can't get the traction to push myself out, and I overused my quirk, so I can't use it to move the slab." That answer hopefully meant some of the more graphic injuries Izuku had been dreading, broken spine and stabbed through with rebar, weren't in play. "What's your quirk?" the blonde asked, drawing her attention. Izuku checked on how much closer the 0-pointer was. If they couldn't move the girl, they were running out of time to stop it, and so far it didn't seem to be stopping on its own. 0 gravity. I can make things float if I touch them with all 5 fingers. "Fantastic," the blonde nodded. "I can copy quirks. I'll copy yours to get this off you." He reached out to touch the girl's arm, not having any time to spare as the knockoff iron giant bore down on them. It was only a couple meters away at this point. "I'll grab you and pull you to the side when he does. We don't want to risk him activating the quirk on you." Izuku moved to get a hold of her under her arms, ready to move the second the slab was gone. It only took a few seconds of moving in tandem for all 3 of them to find themselves panting on the dusty sidewalk, safely out of the way of the treads of the machine as it pushed past them, crushing everything under its treads. Izuku had to fight the temptation to laugh a little hysterically. He really hadn't enjoyed facing that kind of close call without Eraser at his back, and those events happened out on patrols. Yes, this was a hero course exam, but it was still an exam, testing, mostly, untrained children. What the actual fuck? "That's it, listeners, the exam's over," President Mike's quirked voice rang out over their heads. "Please make your way back to the front gate. We've got a medical team set up to check you all over. If you're injured, stay in place and we'll send someone over to you." "Jesus fucking Christ," the blonde kid muttered, staring at where the 0-pointer had pulled to a stop down the street. "Agreed," Izuku concurred. "You should stay sitting," he said to the girl. "You want one of us to stay with you while we wait for whoever they're sending. Also, I'm Izuku." They'd nearly been crushed by a robot together. It was probably expected to introduce himself, right? Izuku hated social situations. Uraraka, the girl, Uraraka apparently, grimaced up at him from where she'd been poking at her ankle. And I wouldn't say no, but you really don't have to. You already lost your chance to get a few extra points by helping me. It's fine, Izuku collapsed backwards to lean against the sun-warmed wall behind him. I'd rather take a breather before walking to the front anyways. Monoma, what he said. Monoma fell into a sitting position where he'd been standing with an unexpected amount of fluid grace. It could have been a different quirk that he'd copied, if he was able to copy more than one at a time, but it was more likely he'd been taking some sort of dance lessons, probably for a while, if not years. With a copy quirk like his, he'd be reliant on quirkless combat to get himself close to whatever villain he was going to copy the quirk of, and dance lessons helped a lot with that. Thank you both, Uraraka enthused, interrupting his thought process. I really thought that robot was going to crush me. Before either boy could respond, though, Recovery Girl emerged from the door of the fake storefront they were in front of, and followed by a few medical robots. Okay, dearies, where are you hurt? She knelt down next to Uraraka, the only one visibly bracing an injury. I think I sprained my ankle, Uraraka grimaced as her ankle was gently examined by the elder healer. Yes, I can see that. Luckily, it's an easy fix. I'm going to give you your hand a kiss, and then you're going to eat the gummies. Uraraka's eyes drooped as her hand was kissed, then perked up again as she ate the gummies Recovery Girl handed her. It was fascinating to watch the healer's quirk in real time. Izuku couldn't wait until he got his hands on his notebook to write about all the amazing quirks he'd seen today. And you two? Recovery Girl looked between the boys. Are either of you hurt? Turns out Monoma had a long scrape on his arm, but Izuku only had a few bruises, so he declined the healing kiss. The lack of energy would be more annoying. He did happily take the small bag of gummies handed to him anyways, though. My nose is itchy. After that, the three were shepherded back towards the entrance and sent off on their merry ways. Izuku took a deep breath as he exited the school's front gate. He'd done his best, but it was out of his hands at this point. Now, it was just a waiting game to see what the future had in store. That is, part 3, and I'm pretty sure the last part of chapter 4. Yeah. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Like, leave a comment, all that good stuff, and I will see you guys next time. Goodbye!